Welcome back to Let the Quran Speak. Dealing with hardship, the Prophet's way. When we face difficulty, we often think, why me? Doesn't God love me anymore? Don't I pray? Don't I fast? Don't I do all the things that God requires? The Islamic tradition is replete with stories of the prophets, all of whom were good human beings, beloved to God, and yet forced to endure and overcome much suffering and hardship nevertheless. These prophets include Joseph, Abraham, Noah, and of course, Muhammad. Why were they given hardship if they were such pure human beings? What sort of tools did they use to overcome the difficulties they faced? And what lessons can we draw from their stories? With me is Brother Shabir Ali. Brother Shabir, the Quran says in one verse, I believe it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter, that something to the effect of why are they complaining or why are they worrying about these hardships that they're facing? Even the messengers of God called out to God and said, where is God? Is God helping me?
Yes, that verse that you're referring to says, "Am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannah walamma ya'tikum mathalu alladhina khalaw min qablikum." Do you think that you're going to enter paradise, whereas the sort of things that happened to the people in the past did not come to you yet? Massatum al-ba'sa wad-darra. They were touched by pain and adversity. حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله, until the messenger and those believers with him said, when is the help of God going to come? And then the Quran's reply to that is, the help of God is surely near.
So often when we're faced with hardship, we think that something is wrong with us or God hates us or something. But it seems like even the messengers of God faced a similar circumstance where they underwent pain and hardship and difficulty.
Yeah, so we don't understand all of the mysteries of life. There are so many different ways in which God could have created, and probably He did create. Perhaps there are many parallel universes with many different forms of life and different kinds of life situations. We are in a particular sort of life situation. This is one sort of thing that God could have created, and He did. Well, in our situation, human beings do benefit in some ways from hardship. It's kind of an irony, but if we had everything smooth, then there'll be nothing to do. But with hardships, there are always challenges, there are difficulties, there are things to overcome. With adversity, there's always something to learn, and that develops our intelligence to a greater level, even to a small degree. The Turkish writer Harun Yahya has used an example that even if you burn your food a little, then that actually registers a lesson with you that could save you from some greater difficulty. Perhaps you might have burnt something of greater worth later on, but the slight hardship that you faced at the moment registers a lesson with you which saves you from a greater harm in the future. So hardships somehow build our character, mold our thinking, develop us as human persons that make us the unique beings that we are here on this planet. And this sort of hardship has come to prophets who were, as you said, the beloved of God, and it can come to anyone, even to good believers, to highly moral individuals.
Can you give us some examples of some of the hardships that the prophets faced and how perhaps they overcame it?
This Quran is replete with stories. If we think about Joseph, for example, the prophet Joseph as a boy was left by his brothers in a well. He was taken up and sold as a slave in Egypt, but eventually, after he was put in prison in Egypt for under suspicion of something that he was not responsible for, eventually he was freed from prison, and he rose in the echelons of the Egyptian monarchy. He became a very important person, so that he could, as the Quran said, يَتَبَوَّأُ حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ, he could do whatever he wanted in Egypt, basically. And then eventually his brothers came to Egypt seeking grain because they were struck by famine. Then they recognized him, and they were afraid that he might take revenge on them. Eventually his family, his parents were brought, and they prostrated before him as people did before their rulers and monarchs at the time. So this shows the difficulties that could afflict even a person like Joseph, a prophet of God, who, according to our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was one of the best individuals ever. He overcame that. He rose to the occasion whenever there was an opportunity. He took responsibility, and for that reason he progressed in Egyptian society where he was, even though he started out as a slave in that society. So if something like this could happen to Joseph, then it could happen to anyone, but we have in his life a lesson for us on how to overcome such adversity. Perhaps that would have been your next question, how do we overcome this?
Yes.
But I've jumped the gun a little bit.
So what about Job? I mean, a lot of people speak of Job because he's mentioned in the Bible. He's called Ayub in the Muslim tradition. He was well known as being a person who was very obedient to God. What did he face, and how did he overcome his difficulties?
In Arabic, it is proverbial to mention the patience of Job, of Ayub.
In English as well.
In English as well,
Yeah.
the patience of Job, yes. Because he was afflicted with so many adversities and loss of family and everything, that one could not expect that in his situation he would remain patient with God. And yet he did remain patient. He did not lose faith in God, according to the Quranic depiction of him. And God eventually restored what he had lost, brought his family back to him, and even multiplied his possessions. So again, we have in his story a lesson of great patience in the face of hardship.
There are many prophets. Are there any in particular that you would like to mention or
Well,
elaborate upon?
our Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, went through much hardship as well. We find that he lost his father while he was still in the womb of his mother. So he was born an orphan. Soon after that, his mother died, and then eventually he was placed under the care of his grandfather. But then his grandfather too died, and he was only 8 years old when he went to live with his uncle Abu Talib. And so he grew up without his parents. He went through a very difficult early phase. When he started to preach the message of Islam, that was another phase of difficulty for him and his early followers. They were persecuted. At one point, they were boycotted by the others, and under these sanctions, nobody would trade with them or intermarry with them. His uncle Abu Talib took the small family, the small clan, and went to seclude themselves so that they could coalesce and help and support each other in the face of these sanctions. And it is said in some of the reports that people were so much in dire need that they would just simply survive by eating the leaves of trees. But eventually the sanction was broken. The will of and determination of those who opposed the message of Islam eventually weakened in the face of this suffering of people who were essentially family to them. And that would give some ease, but still the persecution continued until the Prophet, peace be upon him, went and preached his message to the people of Ta'if, where he was stoned, and then he pleaded to God in making dua or supplication, asking for God's mercy and protection. And it was then that God gave him the beautiful experience of the Isra and Mi'raj, which Muslims continue to remember up to this day.
So it seems like after all of these prophets faced these hardships, eventually God came to the rescue and helped them out.
Exactly. The
So
Quran.
what were the characteristics that they had that allowed them to endure throughout the hardships and difficulties they faced?
Well, one of the characteristics is very strong faith in the presence of God, knowing that God is there and He is taking care of all things. In Arabic, there's the term tawakkul, which means reliance on God. And that doesn't mean that you do nothing and just leave everything to God, but it means that despite all of our efforts, in the end, God is watching over all things. He is the ultimate controller, and He will bring about that which is best. It may not not be what we are working for. Some other result may become apparent, but we can be sure that God stores up a reward for us, and all of the hardships that we endure here has an equivalent reward that God will give us for those hardships. And in the end, the Quran assures us that with every difficulty there is ease, and it's not that difficulty will pass and then the ease will come, but even in the situations of difficulty, there is some ease that we can experience.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this topic?
Well, it is interesting that the Prophet, peace be upon him, is noted to have said to one of his companions, like the companion came and said, Messenger of God, I love you. And the Prophet said, well, think carefully about what you said, because if what you're saying is true, then you should be prepared to meet with all kinds of adversity and difficulty. And the man thought about it and said, Messenger of God, I love you. And the lesson from this is that believers will face these difficulties. We can think of ourselves as going through different stages of development. And as children and students go through very different stages, and they have harder and more difficult tests at higher levels, we will be tested at higher levels as well. So we have to be prepared for that. These difficulties are tests from God, from the Muslim point of view, to see how we would react, whether we would react with patience and fortitude, and whether we'll keep our trust in God or not.
Thank you for that, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we answer questions we've received from you, our viewers.